Like education budgets all around the state of Connecticut, our Hartford Public Schools budget is facing severe cuts this year. Our community partners help us to provide many necessary services to our students and families. And one model that 7 of our schools implement is the National Community Schools model. To help us explore how, in these tough budgetary times, we can best leverage this powerful model and our community partnerships, I would like to welcome Tauhida Jackson, Director of the Hartford Partnership for Student Success, Jacqueline Santiago, Chief Operating Officer of Compass Youth Collaborative, Damian Morgan, Community School Director for the Asian Studies Academy at Belize School, and Craig Stallings, Hartford resident and business owner, Secretary of the Hartford Public Schools Board of Education, and Chair of its Finance and Audit Committee. Thank you all for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tauhida, I'll start with you. What is a community school, and in what ways does it differ from a traditional school model?
So community school is a regular school. So when you say traditional, it is traditional in the sense that it provides everything that a traditional school would provide, but it does have services that go above and beyond. It is the hub of the community. It is looked at as the place where all of learning happens for not only students, but for families and for community members. So you see everything from mental health services to dental services, a lot of other during the day interventions that may help support students in their need to be able to sit in classroom and be able to be ready to learn. So if you think about everything that a community needs to be able to support their students and student success, that's what a community school would be. So we have agencies within the schools that provide services above and beyond the school day and academic needs of the students, and that allows students and families to have the ability to be able to utilize the school in a way where it is the hub of the community.
So along those lines and this notion of the hub, Jacqueline, can you tell me, tell us a little bit about the fascinating history behind Hartford's Compass Youth Collaborative, and see if you can connect that to that notion of it being a hub.
Absolutely. Compass Youth Collaborative was really born in 1995 as a result of the violence that was happening in the city. So Hartford Areas Rally Together was really responsible for working with some residents and youth who went door knocking, door to door, asking the question, what is it that our residents really need? What is it that the kids really want? And they said, loud and clear, we want a youth center. And so from there, we developed what was then South End Night Riders. That was our former name. And we started in the St. Augustine School as a drop-in center, and it was only 3 days a week. But as the word got around and we realized how much need there was, we outgrew that facility, moved next door to Jubilee House, which was in the basement, offering services and doing field trips. It is what it is. You do with what you got, right?
Yeah.
So we were providing services there and soon outgrew that facility.
Wow.
And that's where our partnership with Hartford Public Schools began. We entered what was then South Middle School, now Belize, and we were providing drop-in services as well as a tutoring program. Every day began with a tutoring program, followed by our drop-in center where anybody from the city could go, 10 to 18 years old. We opened our doors and they could play basketball for 4 hours, or they could engage in martial arts or computer programming, but it was very much a drop-in model. So we have to evolve, right? We've soon realized that it's no longer efficient just to have an after-school, just a place where they can come in and be safe. We have to provide after-school programming that has quality enrichment programs. And so we embarked with the help of the Hartford Foundation, doing what was then called the After School Initiative. The After School Initiative really allowed us to really dive deep into providing after-school programs with research-based curriculum and those kinds of things. And then we outgrew that, right?
Wow, yes.
The kids need something more. And so what we all came together as community, because this didn't evolve from one entity, we all worked together on this. And what we really needed was to be a support to Hartford Public Schools. You're already doing great things. You have a captive audience, you have kids coming every single day that trust you, but no one can do this work alone. And so the idea is that we're providing full services at a school, you know, creating a hub of activity, kind of putting our finger on the pulse and asking people, what is it that you really want? That should never be, forgotten from the model. We have to find out what it is that they need and ask questions about what they need, and then strategize with the principal in order to get the results that we need for the school. So we really come in to support the teachers, the principals, and strategize on what, if you're focusing all day on instruction, what can we do besides after school to do assessments and do other things to provide those services to the kids, thereby removing barriers to learning and creating successful kids.
So I can appreciate the timeline that you've given us and the way that you've been responsive to the student and the school needs. And I'm going to ask then, Damien, how that is playing out, say, at your current site. So as a community school director working with our children and our teachers at Asian Studies Academy at Belize School, what would you say specifically is Compass's greatest impact within the school?
Well, I think there are a couple of different ways that I can answer that question. To piggyback on what Jackie said, one of the things that Compass has been able to provide to the students and the surrounding community at Asian Studies Academy is longevity. The fact that as an agency, we've been a part of the school as it has transitioned from South Middle to Belize Middle to now Asian Studies Academy. There's a degree of consistency that comes along with that. And so as parents enroll their children into the school, some of the reasons why they do so is because of the long-standing relationship that Compass has had with the school and by extension Harvard Public Schools. And also just an understanding of the community needs. Part of my job as a community school director is to do a series of multiple assessments. You do assessments for the parents, you do assessments for the surrounding neighbors that live across the street around the corner, you do assessments with local businesses, and you also do assessments with the students. The idea behind those assessments is to gather that information to figure out what existing services do we have within the building that you're utilizing, and what do you think we need to bring in. In some instances, it could just be the agency itself identifying resources that we have already that exist to fill those voids, or going out and identifying new community partners to bring them into the building to address what those needs are. So the most important thing is consistently knowing what the needs are for the students, the staff, the surrounding community, the business partners, and then figuring out how do we support those through the community school model.
So I'm hearing a trend, a theme, and that's around the partnership aspect of the work. And I heard you, Damien, talk about the parent perspective. And so I'm going to then ask you, Craig, so like me, you are a child of Hartford,
Yes.
right? You are a graduate of Hartford Public Schools. You are also a parent, a businessman in the city, and you're very active. You're very active on our Board of Education, and you are also the chief of the chair of our Finance and Audit Committee. And how does your role as a parent inform the work that you do on the board?
It helps because it provides perspective. I'm operating from a parent perspective. I'm operating from I want my child to receive all the resources that they're supposed to receive and get the education that they're supposed to get. So what I'm trying to do is create a budget and a financial structure that supports the student, the actual student, the actual learning process, and not the administrative process or the cronyism or the friend network, but actually try to fund the core education process and structure of every school.
What then do you think about the fact that we're facing extremely tough budgetary times? What do we need to do then to ensure that we protect what matters most to us?
My response is somewhat non-traditional in the sense that I think education as a whole should be reevaluated. And we should really reassess how we're operating and how we're delivering educational services from the Hartford Public School System, because I don't think that we're doing a very efficient job of doing that. And I say that to mean when you listen to community partners and they talk about identifying need in the community, what that is perspective. And so if they're identifying social-emotional needs or economic needs that are barriers to learning in the classroom, then we also have to think about how instruction is being delivered and what perspective is being delivered and how it's being delivered. So for example, just being chair of finance and audit, you understand and you come across certain financial terms, and you have to understand those things. Now, if parents don't understand them, if we're talking about a budget, then they can't follow along. And so, for example, where I'm from in the neighborhoods, and join in if you think I'm wrong, right? And it doesn't make a difference. I'm sorry by hitting the mic. For example, when I grew up, I referred to money as cream. Cash rules everything around me. And so when you look at the public school system and you think about the financial structure of it and how we fund it and why it's so underfunded, is because money rules and our financial lobby is we don't have one. It's non-existent. So when you're a child looking at the world through a child's eyes, if cash rules everything around me and I'm looking at broke down, run down community, my schools are dilapidated, I have the honor of meeting community warriors who are fighting for me and fighting for my life. But when you really step back and take a good analysis of the picture, the Harvard Public School System is supposed to be able to either lobby and receive and secure funds and revenues so that we can continue to operate and deliver our services. And we're not in a position to do that as a board because we do not generate revenue.
So as we think about our need to ensure that our resources are aligned to our priorities,
Right.
Tauhida, how are costs shared between Hartford Public Schools and the partnership?
So I'll give a little bit of a background for the support system first. So the Hartford Partnership for Student Success includes the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, the United Way, the school system, Hartford Public Schools, and the City of Hartford. Those are the 4 founding and funding members of the Hartford Partnership for Student Success. So that body is a stakeholder body that not only looks at financing the community schools effort, but also is a governing body of that effort. When we look at how it is financed, the school system puts in a portion of money, about $95,000, towards the infrastructure budget, which is about 21% of that infrastructure budget. The direct grants that go to lead agencies like Compass Youth Collaborative, we have 4 different lead agencies, so Compass is one of them. We have Boys and Girls Club, we have the Village, and we also have Catholic Charities. The direct grants that go to schools for the lead agencies to be embedded in the schools for the community schools work comes from the partnership, primarily the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving in the United Way. And then the Hartford also is one of our newer members of the partnership that provides direct grants to the lead agencies in service of the schools. So when you look at how Hartford Public Schools fits into that, they fund the infrastructure budget, which funds a part of my salary. We also have a community school coordinator that also does technical assistance and a lot of development and capacity building with the lead agencies. We have an evaluation that gets paid out of that. We also have some other technical supports and things like that for the structural cost. But in regard to the direct service or the direct cost to schools, the partnership, the other funders of the partnership fund that directly through the lead agencies.
Can I interject for a second?
Sure.
I think the flaw, in my opinion, with that structure is you have the city, you have the superintendent, you have the district, you have these partners, but the board is cut out of that. And so when you think, again, about Hartford Public Schools, it's the board's core values and the vision of the board that should be implemented. And if you cut out the actual governing entity that is putting forth this decree, listen, we want to make sure that our core values are this, and we want to make sure that our mission statement is here, and we're not involved in these critical conversations with these schools, about these schools, then that is one of the reasons why we have a disconnect in terms of what our priorities are, how we're funding them, and how we're making sure that these schools are aligning with our core values, our mission statement, so forth and so on.
As the board is the governing structure of Hartford Public Schools, I think there's opportunity through the voices of the representatives that sit on the partnership and through the superintendent to really look at what are those things that come to the table. So all of the work that we're doing through community schools is aligned with the strategic operating plan, is aligned with the school improvement plans with the principals. So we are looking at what are the things that the district has laid out as priority areas and focus areas, and really looking at how we align the work. So it's not just after school work or just services that we're providing, but looking at those during the day interventions and how we can align what's happening during the school day in the classroom, and then also in the after school, so that we can maximize our
I get
impact.
that, but at the end of the day, it's the Board of Education that you all represent, not the superintendent. It's not the Board of Superintendent. It's not the Board of the Mayor. It's the Board of Education. Therefore, and I understand what you're saying, but the point that I'm making is, how's it been working? how's the oversight in this? It's been non-existent because you have an entity that really has the power and the authority to intervene and cut some red tape to allow you to operate more efficiently or to streamline the district so that you can operate more efficiently and more effectively. And we have yet, as a board, been able to really evaluate and analyze this so that we can either remove red tape and barriers from you or be more efficient or have a more structured partnership. Because again, when you think about this, I'm thinking about the small churches on Barber Street and other places where they may want to do something but don't have the capacity to do something. If they can funnel some of their resources to a community school director or somewhere else, then, you know, and so my point is we want everyone involved.
They may be provider, but they are primarily a broker of services. So really looking at what are some of those smaller entities in our communities that we can leverage even better. I think that that's an opportunity also when we have limited resources. How are we looking at the expertise in the community and really making sure that we're really digging deep and really bringing people to the table to be able to serve those needs.
And I think it's exactly what Tauhida said. You know, a community school partner is just that. It's a partner. We're all doing this together. No one entity can do it by themselves, right? So if we're doing this together and we're, as a lead agency, we're working with the principal, asking them, what do you need? We're working with the parents, what do you need? We're asking the board, we're asking everyone, what is it that you need, so that we can come up with a strategy to leverage the limited resources we have, right? And as a community partner, when you have a lead agency in a school, that's exactly their role. They're kind of being that partner, that liaison that kind of connects all of the pieces on the ground. But we're also, as a lead agency, going out there and grant writing, you know, and bringing in resources that you might not have access to because you're not a 501c3, for example. So, you know, it's more than just providing the after school, it's what services can we provide during the school day that will enhance student learning, that will engage parents in the education of their kids, and most importantly, bringing additional partners, right, to the table. What can we bring? You know, Compass doesn't have it all, the village might not have it all, but together we could do it, you know, in one setting. And I think the community schools are doing great work where they're bringing in partners from different all over the different parts of the city, but also bringing in their own dollars to support the funds for Hartford Public Schools. So.
And I think it's also important to ensure that we or even the leadership, right, so as a superintendent, to create the structures and the conditions that are necessary in order to cultivate the relationship, in order to make sure that we maintain the relationship, and in order to ensure that all of the voices, you know, are at the table during our planning, our continuous improvement process, and in planning ahead. And I think we've started to do that. Just look at how we're approaching our budget development process this year, which is an enhanced engagement process in which we want and we expect, quite frankly, just like you expect from us, a level of transparency, a level of ongoing communication. We expect the same in terms of let's come to the table in service of our students to identify how is it that we can collaboratively assess what it is that we're going to deliver to our students. So I think not losing sight of that important element, those foundational structures and conditions that must be ongoing with all of our partners. As a lead agency, Jacqueline, what role would you say the agency has in extending its reach and making sure it grows and changes over time? You've kind of shared the trajectory for us. What's next? What do you see moving forward?
It's really about building capacity, I think, and strengthening what we have. I think we have a good model. I think, like anything else, it could use some improvements. You know, we can strengthen partnerships. We can bring additional people to the table. And I think that's going to take, you know, some joint training, not only with the school. We've learned a lot, you know, as a community agency, we've learned a lot from Hartford Public Schools and differentiated learning instruction and all of those things, but we would also like the opportunity to do training around youth development, you know, relationship building. A lot of these things are really crucial for teachers and personnel at the school at every level. And so we'd like that opportunity as well as, you know, at least for Compass, we've also talked about possibly training other community agencies. The idea that partnership is, you know, we throw that around so easily, but it's not very easy. You know, we often call it a marriage, you know, and when you first get together, it's like the honeymoon stage. Everything's fine, everything's good, then someone leaves their socks in the middle of the floor, and then there's, you know, there's issues, right? But there's also an opportunity to build capacity for those agencies. Not every agency has had the benefit of, you know, access to, you know, best practices. What can we do to, you know, build capacity for these agencies so that they can also be a resource to the schools that we serve? Additionally, you know, do a continuous asset mapping. Our city's changing so much, you know, on a regular basis. Do we really know what's out there and what we can bring into our schools? Because it is about creating a reciprocal relationship. It's as much as our kids go home into their neighborhoods every day, but are we bringing that neighborhood into our schools as well, right?
Absolutely not.
Right?
No,
and that's
right.
why it's an
You're
area of
You're
improvement, right?
You're right. You're right. Because I mean, if you think about that, adolescent development, children are developing, and they're constantly developing from the moment they hit pre-K into 12th grade. And so, if you are a new teacher and you're not trained to recognize this, or you're a new parent and you're going through these phases for the first time, and you don't understand what you're looking at, that's troublesome, and that's room for conflict. I mean, I have 2 kids now, adolescent. They're pubescent, and so now they're staying up later, you know, and you know, get a little bass in their voice, and you have to check them on the weekend. But you know, it's a different challenge. You know, now it's not simply as, you know, go there, do this, or why, and you know, but perspective is truly what we should be looking at, because like Jackie looked at the community perspective, but from the education perspective, it is the same. Are we trying to replicate the positive things that are in the community in the classroom? Are we supporting the learning outside the 4 walls in the brick and mortar? Because that's where majority of the learning is actually going to take place, and or the learning that they spent, or the time they spent for the 8 hours in the classroom, that's going to be reinforced once they leave. So are they applying what they learned in school outside of school? Are they using the shortcuts and things that they learned in science or algebra? For example, algebra, I was taught algebra is solving for the unknown, you know. And so, for example, if I lost my wallet, what's the algebraic formula that I go through? I was here and I was here and here to find my wallet. Right. So if you need money and you have no skills, well, what is your process to require skills so that you can earn money? Right. And so that's the disconnect that we're having in the community versus the school. So you have high poverty levels of people outside the school, or high literacy levels or illiteracy. Excuse me. Come on, man.
I got you.
So you have those things. I did it again, Deb, sorry. You have these issues and these elements, and that impacts learning, because if you have children that are surrounded by adults who have not advanced their education, that have not taken advantage of it, and they are committed to a particular counterculture, then that's what that child is going to project, and that's how they're going to live, and that's how they're going to think. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a matter of trying to make the correlation between academic learning and how they are learning, actually learning in life. And so that's the kind of things that we need to do. We need to bridge those gaps.
When Jackie lifted up leveraging resources, I think we need to look beyond just monetary resources, because expertise to me is a resource also.
It is.
So when we look at
Huge resource that we don't
the
tap
fact
into.
that we've been very intentional in having our lead agencies attend PDs for schools and get the academic training that they need to be able to understand the education piece of it, because they're not primarily trained as educators, right? But they have an expertise in youth development, and I think the reverse can happen. So we have teachers that may be able to use youth development practices to really look at how they're dealing with behaviors in their classroom, really thinking about how they leverage the expertise of the lead agency for the reverse to happen. So I think that there is an opportunity through all of this also to leverage our expertise and make sure that we're really having a mutual respect for what everyone brings to the table and really utilizing that.
You know, I just want to add one thing. That there's a huge caveat to that, which is chef. Because chef brings a different entity. So we're talking about defining education, what education looks like in our communities and our neighborhoods. and these are neighborhood schools, and not all of the children in our neighborhoods attend neighborhood schools.
Right.
And so now, like I said, so and that's the major issue. So we're sitting here talking about these things when there are other entities and other aspects that impact this that
Absolutely.
we need to get to the table so that we can have a general idea and define what education is going to look like in Hartford, and so.
And you're talking about, systems building and
Right, yeah.
advocacy
and
policy
eradicating shadow
and-
governments
Okay.
and
Which-
that kind of stuff.
Which also kind of makes me think about how are we extending the learning, right? You talked about this, the capacity building and the human capital, and making sure that our teachers benefit from the learning around positive youth development, and then that the staff, you've been at trainings and professional learning at Asian Studies around
Data-wise.
continuous improvement. And so how do we extend that to our parents, right? You spoke about the students learning and being able to apply their learning, transfer their learning to the real world, which, by the way, is what this is all about when you really think about it, right? How is it that what I'm learning today is going to help me out in my community or later on? So that transfer of knowledge, I'm wondering how, from a community school partnership perspective, that comes to life.
I would say one perfect example of that is what I was able to do at Asian Studies a couple of years ago, is introduce the parents to Mind in the Making. The concept behind Mind in the Making is for early childhood development, those executive functioning skills. And so the wonderful thing about that aspect is I created a fair where all the parents in grades K through 2 were able to come and attend, and they were able to participate in very specific activities that connect to the executive functioning skills, and then they were able to take home resources that they could then utilize at home with their students. By extension, I was also able to engage the K through 2 teachers, and so the teachers themselves were able to get exposed to the Mind in the Making executive functioning skills, and then now they're able to continue utilizing those same skills in the classroom. So they're reinforcing what we hope the parents are utilizing at home with their students, and it allows the students themselves to start to learn how to develop their minds. And I think it's had an impact on the teachers' ability to really develop the students, and spending more time focusing in on their brain development, which by extension is going to have an impact on them achieving academically. So I think that's one good example of how we've been able to identify a need, transfer that knowledge information through the lead agency, extend it to the families, extend it to the parents, and then see how it has an impact on the children.
And family engagement has been a true focus of ours, and really looking at dual capacity. So how are we working together with families and not doing things to families and making decisions for them? So one of the things that we have really been focusing on is really looking at how we're doing family engagement, not just our potlucks or our pizza parties or the Thanksgiving dinner. All of those things are great and they're great supports, but in thinking about how we get to academic success. So how are we helping parents better be more equipped to be able to help their students with academic progress? So we have had some community schools, to Damien's point, that may create extension activities that they send home that might be happening during the school day. Our United Way partner, they provide literacy kits with books so that students that might not be in a literacy-rich home have resources that they can bring home. So I think there's a lot of room to extend that and really look at how are we talking some of the education language to parents so that they understand when they show up to get their report card, if there's a DIBEL score, if there's a MAP score, how are we decoding some of these things that might be kind of coded for them that they may not understand what is being delivered to their student? And then what are some of the things that they can do at home to reinforce those skills? So I think there is a lot of room for growth in that, but we do have some examples within the community school model that is happening.
And Craig had talked earlier about, how do you get to that, to the money, right? How do you get to building those skills? What's that path? And sometimes it's as simple as parents need education too. Parents need an opportunity to build themselves too. And so we've had sites where we have, ESL offered or GED offered, because when the parents are thriving, the kids will thrive.
Right.
Generational learning is important.
You talked about chef, and you were using this kind of concept that just like our students, right? There's the student, there's the learner, there's the child, and then there are these other elements at play, right? And so you started to talk about the system and chef being an element. So from that perspective, what sort of reform of our school's budgetary structures, our city's financial structure, or the structure and even bylaws of the Board of Education would you recommend, given our current context?
We don't have enough time.
Try it.
I would say first I would eliminate student-based budget. Student-based budgeting, SBB, in my opinion, was a cost-cutting, cost-saving tool, financial tool. And what it did was it would project where you can sort of implement savings and not, and it wasn't adequately funding our most needy students in our needy schools. In fact, what it was doing, it was creating more hardship because it was taking funds away and resources away from the most needy, and putting them where there are more students and there are a high concentration of students who have resources and have abilities to navigate some of the things. So I would start there. The second thing I would do is I would completely eliminate chef. I said that, you guys didn't, because it is completely not working, and it's a barrier to our children, and the funding structure from the state is not fair and it's not adequate. With that said, the other thing, the city of Hartford in and of itself has a spending problem. And so I would urge my colleagues on the other side to reduce spending and sort of maximize some of our assets. For example, we have had Equity 2020 last couple of months, and there was a proposal to close 6 schools on the what you call it, because we're talking about, we have financial issues and we have low enrollment, and we have so we need to change and restructure our system. But when you look at some of the moves that the city made a couple of years ago, and I know you said, you know, that's in the past, we have time to move forward and, and build from here.
But it's still relevant.
Right.
It's absolutely
so when you look at just the parking authority, for example, the city sold it for maybe $1 million, and they just earned $5 million in the past year, putting boots on cars, ticketing cars, and towing cars. And if the city was aggressive in trying to recoup revenue, then that 1% to 2% of the budget can go to education, then we can fund our neighborhood schools adequately. We don't have to worry about community-based organizations going out, supplementing our budgets and trying to fill gaps, but they can actually provide the services that they were intending to provide, because the onus of actually educating students is our responsibility. I did it again, Deb, sorry. It's our responsibility, and what we want to do is we want to own up to our responsibility and fund children and fund education so that the community-based organizations can supplement and create more, build more capacity in the community. So when we talk about generational learning, that's where that happens. So for example, two of my favorite poets, Walt Whitman, Leaves the Grass, love that. And he talked about, in Leaves the Grass, he talked about never looking at people, don't take information through someone else's eyes, not second or third person, but filter all this information from yourself, and then you decide what's true. And so, for example, if you're offering Walt Whitman to parents who've never heard of Walt Whitman, then they don't understand that. But if I'm reading Iceberg Slim at home, and you know I'm talking to my child about the Ghetto Creed, and the Ghetto Creed says the strongest will feed. The Ghetto Creed is the strongest feed of every. The Ghetto Creed says the strongest will feed off any prey that it can. Before every feast, I was branded beast before I became a man. And that's kind of consistent with what life is in the neighborhood. So for example, you're offering this, and I don't understand it when I respond more to this. And this is more empowering. So if you empower me, and you give me information that I can identify with and relate with and build my own self-esteem and confidence, and then you can start to introduce other aspects and sort of broaden my horizons. But if you're simply just saying, listen, you need to learn, we're going to throw all these acronyms at you, but we're not going to focus on you. And education is a personal process. You know, it's about, in my opinion, about not simply just discipline, academic discipline, and developing a mind so you get a job, but it's about liberating the soul and freeing your being. So for me and for us in the community, in the neighborhoods, our perspective on education is way different than the districts or the city, and what we need to do has a meeting of the minds. So again, the major issue here is funding, and we have assets we need to monetize, and what we should be doing is looking at those things. So again, I'm appalled when we talk about closing 6 schools, but then Hartford Detention lockup inmates are getting televisions, you know, while they're sitting in jail. So you want to entertain people in jail, but not educate our children. That is offensive. When you talk about closing schools, but then you have parking garages where you could generate millions of dollars, and you're not funding or putting anything, you're flat funding education at Hartford. That's not a priority for Hartford. So the city itself has to make education a priority. The city itself has to make revitalizing neighborhoods through schools a priority. And if we don't do that as a city, then the Board of Education, our hands are limited, our hands are tied, and our response is limited because we cannot generate revenue. We're dependent on the state and the city for revenue. And if that revenue doesn't come, then we have to cut. And that's not even a way to operate a business. So it's bad planning, and we need to do more planning. We need to restructure our budget, and we need to restructure our district. We have 48 schools, way too big. We need to strategically make sure that we have regional schools that are attracting suburban kids, but at the same time, making sure that quality education for our neighborhood kids are our priority, because that is our tax base, that is our future, and that is our future workforce for the city. And we are cutting our nose to spite our face.
So we've talked about during the onset of our budget process the fact that this is going to be a student need,
absolutely,
priority-based budget development process that
absolutely
requires multiple engagements with many voices.
Absolutely.
And so if you've been at the center of that planning process, what
Yes.
are your thoughts as to, one, the process, and looking ahead as to what we might anticipate later on, say a month, 6 weeks from now, when we're fully embedded with all of the voices in the process?
I'm absolutely staking my political career on this budget process, in the sense that it has to be all hands on deck, and everyone has to participate in it. I think that parent input, community input, and teacher input is vital. And if we do not listen to these entities and construct a budget that is going to support what their work is, then we're not even in the game. So I am resisting the traditional methods and the traditional processes, and I am not going to yield, bend, or scratch where I don't itch on this. So I'm authorizing, my committee is authorizing, I did it again, Deb, sorry. My committee is authorizing the superintendent to engage fully all community partners, all parents, all organizations, all stakeholders, to, one, be transparent about the budget, two, to talk about the hardships, and three, to collaboratively look at how we can support every student. And
When you talk about collaboration, and we attended the Student Governance Council session that you had in the community earlier this week. And I think that that's an opportunity too, because you have community partners who sit on SGCs and really can look at the budget in a different way. It's one thing to look at what the school is bringing, but when we look at kind of what are some of the in-kind services and what are some of the other things that are being leveraged by the community-based organizations, it's a different way of thinking of the budget. So not looking to supplant anything or any responsibility that the district has, but how are we supplementing that? And when you mentioned about how is this financed, that $95,000 leverages millions of dollars. So in direct grants alone, there are over $2 million, and then that doesn't even include all of the resources that the lead agencies are bringing in as in-kind or as expertise, or them just as lead agencies. They were selected for a reason, because they do have resources and access to resources. So I think doing the budget in the community sense, where we are sitting with the SGCs and sitting with parents and having the community-based organizations there, just gives a different perspective on where we can look at leveraging some of those resources.
Putting together a budget like a community.
Yeah.
It also allowed for, based on the feedback, it also allowed an opportunity for people to understand the historical context, right? Where have we been?
Correct.
Where does the funding come from? How has that funding looked like in previous years? How has it looked like under an SBB model, which, by the way, was specifically identified for that reform,
Correct.
for the goals of that
years
that reform. And so here we are, right, at a completely different context, yet the needs and the values of our students still remain at the core of, at the forefront of everything that we do. And so making sure that, one, we leverage the external, that other perspective that you all bring, that we're making sure that we say, bring then your knowledge and expertise of the trauma-informed care, for example, the positive youth development, so that you can augment the needs that we have that may not only necessarily be the financial need, right? And so those type of strategies, I think, are going to be so important throughout this process, and making sure that we hear not only from our partners, but also from our parents and our students, right? The major consumers
Right.
of what it
Absolutely.
is
Exactly
that
what it is.
we are
Customers.
here
They're our
called
customers.
to do, to serve in the best interest of our students and our families.
Yeah.
They're our customers.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, the parents are customers, students are the product.
That's right.
And if are we putting out quality product?
Yep.
And that's the ultimate issue, or the ultimate question, is the Hartford Public School System putting out a quality product, and are we providing quality educational services?
Right.
And if not, how can we do that? Because that's our responsibility first and foremost. And so again, you have to just look at in context. With the past 5 years, I think the Board of Education is surrendered or sent $28 million to the city. And so, again, in that kind of a makeup, that is not how we can sustain education. You know, because again, we can't afford to surrender or forfeit and return money. We have to maximize it and budget it out so that we utilize it. And so, again, as a politician, our political structure is kind of backwards. And so we have to really have open, honest conversations about that. So I'm hoping to have this budget process to have that conversation as well, because again, we have been surviving as a city off the backs of our children, and that is no way to promise or to secure a promising future for our city and our children if we are marginalizing their education and sort of taking money from the side door, taking money out the back door, and then relying on a CBO to fill that plug, or then talking about closing schools and let's bust them out, and then elevate our transportation budget. Right now it's between $24 and $20 million, and all we're going to do is increase that. When we have schools that kids can walk to, we can sort of reduce the transportation budget and reinvest that money in educational services. And then, like I said, and I know you may not want to hear this, but central office is way too big, and so we have redundant departments. For example, we have a redundant human resource and OTM department that we might be able to merge, and we also have a finance department that the city council is thinking about and want to merge, and we haven't done that as of yet because, again, maybe I want to baby the best idea to cope being with money, but we have opportunities to sort of make savings at central office so that we don't affect and lay off teachers, and so we don't affect the operation of what we're trying to do. So we really have to have that open conversation, and I'm willing to have it, I'm going to have it, and I'm stepping on toes.
So I will end by reminding us that what we value requires us that we behave right in support of that.
Right.
And so I always ask the question, do our commitments match our convictions? So if we are saying that the provision of high quality teaching and learning for each and every one of our students is at the core of what we do, are our actions
Correct.
aligned? Do our actions show that that is what we value? And so that's going to be our test
Absolutely.
throughout this entire budget process. And
That's
so
a big question.
and I
Because it just
wonder-
makes me think about, especially everything that's happening nationally with, the nominee for Department of Education. There's so many questions and conversations around school choice, but we seem to kind of be leaving out the component of school equity. School choice has never been a problem. Parents can send their kids wherever they want to. The issue is, are you sending your student to a school that is equitable? Are you sending your student to a school that is high functioning, that has good leadership, strong partnerships, and that is preparing those children for the next level, that's preparing them, for the next generation of what society is going to be like? So I think as we're looking at these conversations nationally and also taking a look at where we stand as a city, there has to be more conversations around, like you said, Craig, we got a lot of schools in Hartford. How many of them are balanced? How many of them are falling apart at the seams? How many of them look like college campuses? Why is there such a disparity between where certain schools are and their degree of technology, and in other schools, and then thinking about the board meeting we were just at last week, where you have staff members complaining about computers not being connected to a printer? Why does that happen in a city where you have so many schools and so many resources? So somewhere within the conversation has to be school equity, because every single student, no matter where they live in the city, deserves to go to a school that is functioning properly, and that has all the resources necessary so that student can succeed, because that informs the parent to make a better decision in order to decide where they want to send their student.
And I think that one step further is that they should have a viable neighborhood option, and then if they choose to exercise choice, that's a parent's choice, right?
Absolutely.
But I think to Craig's point is really looking at our very core, our neighborhood schools where kids should be able to walk to a viable option and an equitable option within our neighborhoods. And then if you want to send your child to a magnet or some other option, you have the right to do that. But I think we just really need to think about how we're looking at, in the landscape of a choice model, how we're looking at the core of our schools, and those schools that where a student would viably or realistically attend because of their address. Your zip code should never determine what type of education or the quality of education that you're getting. And I think in Hartford you do see disparities in that sense.
And that exists because you have a case that is being litigated, and you have 3 white people in a room talking about diversity for black and brown students all over, and when you have that, they're coming from their perspective. So they're looking at through the lens of, this is what I want for my child, and not necessarily, well, I'm going to respect the cultural differences in what's coming up throughout the neighborhoods. And that's that disconnect, because for them, they're looking at it like, well, why would you want a neighborhood school? Why do you want to be in that neighborhood? And for us, it's because this is what we know and love, and this is our community.
Because it's across the street.
Right, and so, you know, you're having different philosophical issues bumping at each other. But again, so those are some of the undercurrents that we have to either expose or we have to deal with directly.
And Dr. Torres, I think when to bring it back to your question of does what we commit to, are we making the commitment to say what we believe, to support our values or what we say we believe in? And just since 2007, we've been in the community schools realm for almost 10 years now. And just having stakeholders and partners who are so committed to this work, I think, is one of the assets that the district does have. The district being a part of that is really looking at how our partners have, through superintendent after superintendent, through all of the changes that we have gone through in Hartford, there has been a consistent group of champions who are really championing our students, are championing our schools, and really looking at ways that we can look at our agenda and just readjust to be able to make sure we have everything that our students need to be able to thrive and learn.
So I want to thank my guests for sharing their time, their experience, their knowledge. As a superintendent, I am committed to ensuring that our community partners remain at the core of this and all conversations in service of each and every one of our students. And so my gratitude to you. I'm Leslie Torres Rodriguez. Thank you for watching Hartford Public Schools Conversations in Education.